Look at me. No, not with your eyes, with that small, guilty voice inside that has been whispering the same two questions since you were 14, am I enough? And if I am not, how do I keep from looking like what I am? If you are listening to this at night, or in the bath, or hiding behind headphones on a crowded train, know this, I can see the precise manner in which you fold uncertainty around your hands like a coat. The part at the collar, the part that never quite sits right, is where you tuck the things you cannot say. The ache you feel when you watch others act as if the world were obvious, that ache is not evidence of weakness. It is a signal. It tells you there is something alive inside you trying to get out, and you keep it contained because the world taught you how to survive by containment. This is not a pep talk. It is an exposure. You will be uncomfortable. That is the point. You live with a small permanency of compromise. Maybe you tell yourself you have realistic expectations. Maybe you apologize for speaking before you think, then practice silence until your opinions atrophy. Maybe you love someone who cannot accept your edges, and so you soften them to the point of erasure. Perhaps you perform a version of yourself at work that would astonish your younger self, and you pay for it by giving them less and less to hold. Or perhaps you hide your most radical, luminous parts because you have absorbed the lesson that to be visible is to be vulnerable and vulnerable means in danger. Plato told us the cave story, most people live chained, watching shadows, mistaking silhouette for substance. Those who turn toward the entrance, who risk light, are punished or ignored by the chain holders. That is older than television and social media, it is older than empires. It is the human condition. But the modern twist is that the chains now are gilded. The shadows now come with likes and validation that taste like truth. We now have 1,000 mirrors that show 1,000 fragments and tell us to choose the most flattering one. We confuse the internet for the sun. Think of your life as a house. There are rooms you show visitors, polished, warmed, decorated. There are rooms kept dark, sometimes they are messy, sometimes quiet, sometimes abandoned. You sweep the floors and close the doors. You do not invite anyone into the rooms with the stains because stains are admission that things happened. But these rooms also contain the real maps, the old letters, maps to your loves, your curiosities, the bruises that shaped your courage. When you never open a room, that architecture begins to deform you. You get used to corralling yourself. This is where morality, psychology, and power meet. Bonhoeffer, the pastor who found moral courage inside institutional collapse, argued that true spirituality is not a hidden softness but a costly grace, the thing that obliges you to act ethically even when it's dangerous. His brave pivot was simple and violent, fidelity to the truth required risk. Nietzsche, conversely, would tell you that truth itself is not neutral, truth is a form of power, the ability to create values and say, thus shall I live. Both insist that authenticity costs something. The cost is not merely social kindness, it's a cut in the familiar flesh of habit. And here is an uncomfortable truth, much of what you call being practical is camouflage. Machiavelli taught princes how to hold power, but underneath the strategies lay an unromantic observation: people do not act purely from ideals. They calculate reputations, they bend to fear, they preserve themselves. We are animals of reputation. We keep ourselves small for the sake of survival, applauding it as wisdom. But survival without the courage to be otherwise is a slow robbery. You wake each morning slightly poorer than the last of your attention toward things that matter. Let me tell you a story. When I was 29, I had a friend, call her Anna. Anna had a voice that shook things. When she was a child she sang loudly in a town that preferred silence. She was punished by teachers, scolded by neighbors, coaxed into quieter forms of brilliance, piano practice, good grades, a respectable job. Years later she worked in a well-lit office where spreadsheets replaced song. She was courteous, precise, and rose quickly because she withheld herself in ways the system rewarded. But at night she would sit at the window and play a crumpled composition she'd kept under a mattress since she was 19. It was imperfect, raw, and it made her weep. One evening she left the secure job. She said she would take a risk. People told her she was naive. She told us she would go teach music at an underfunded community center. The center was a room without air conditioning, full of children who had been taught by the same logic she had: be small and be safe. Anna taught them how to sing in a way that demanded mistakes. She used to say, "Sing badly. Sing loudly. Sing back at life." Her pupils learned to make noise. Something shifted. But life is never a clean victory. Anna's risk came with debt. She lost a relationship that was anchored to a version of her that paid the rent. She had to cope with loneliness and the mockery of former colleagues. Years later, she made a record nobody expected to break ranks. That record did not make her comfortable financially, but it taught her something radical: a life in which you do not betray the shape of your desire is itself a currency. You may be poor, but you are not bankrupt. To the children who had learned to sing, her choice gave them permission to be visible. The twist? Anna was not bravely different in every way. She also learned how to be practical, to pay bills, to manage relationships. The point is not to burn everything down the moment you feel small. The point is to refuse to live your whole life as a compromise disguised as prudence. You are probably asking, okay, but how do I know which compromise is poisonous and which is prudent? Good question. There is a method, but it's not sexy. It is moral triage, something Bonhoeffer practiced. Ask whether your choices extract your voice for a reason of fear or for a reason of responsibility. Fear returns, stay invisible to avoid pain. Responsibility returns, I am sacrificing something for the flourishing of something larger than my fear. Both ask commitment, but one is cowardice pretending to be prudence, the other is courage pretending to be order. There is also a psychological element. Modern cognitive science shows that humans conserve energy by automating decisions. Habits are energy-saving. But emulsified into a life, habit can calcify. Your unconscious becomes an efficient machine for maintaining your current state. The brain loves predictions. When you do something new, neurons have to fire in unfamiliar ways, energy is required, anxiety spikes. Better to keep the old script. This is why you keep repeating patterns in relationships, why you pick the same kind of partner, why you stay in the same lane at work, why you refuse to tell that one truth. The unconscious organizes your safety. We can be precise here without being cold. Habituation is a survival mechanism turned tyrant. The moment you begin to act contrary to a long-standing pattern, your body accuses you of betrayal. You will feel grief. You will feel anger. You will feel a compulsion to return. Recognize this as an interior immune response, messy, noisy, but predictable. So what to do? Stoics would say, practice. Kierkegaard would whisper, make an existential leap. Nietzsche would bark, cultivate a new posture. The advice sounds like slogans, but we can make it practical without killing the poetry. First practice, the small dissidence. Each day do one thing that signals you to yourself that you are not wholly contained. It can be minor: speak one truth you usually soften, say no to a rote favor, write a paragraph that no one will see that nails down your hunger, look at your reflection and name one thing you want to try that scares you. Small acts of alignment accrete. They rewire the brain. Second practice, moral listing. Borrowing Bonhoeffer's posture, make 2 columns. What you will not compromise and why, what you can prudently compromise and why. Be honest. The list is not a weapon against others but a diagnostic tool for you. At the top of the first column put the non-negotiable: I will not betray the feeling that drives my best work, I will not consent to violence in the name of safety. You will be surprised at how few items that list contains. Paradoxically, fewer non-negotiables often make the rest of life simpler. Third practice, narrative excavation. Take a single story from your past that shaped a recurring fear: a rejection at 13, a parent's sarcasm, a humiliating job interview. Tell that story in minute detail, preferably to a sympathetic listener or in a written journal. Then ask, who was the actor? Who was the audience? Whose lines did you internalize? Ask what social or familial logic produced the ruling sentence you now follow. This is psychological archaeology. There is power in naming the origin. When you know who wrote the script, you can decide whether to keep performing it. And then a harder practice, embrace disillusionment. A dangerous religious lie says, if you are faithful, the world will be kind. A dangerous capitalist lie says, if you perform, you will be rewarded. Neither is true. Neither is the point. Here is another uncomfortable truth: sometimes the world will punish you for acting honestly, and sometimes the world rewards mimicry. Life is neither moral dessert tray nor cosmic justice machine. If you are doing something honest and important, you must do it without a guarantee of comfort. That uncertainty is the payment for being real. This is where philosophy becomes therapy, becomes politics. To be authentic is to be someone who can live in the tension between being vulnerable and exercising power. Nietzsche named a vital task, to become who you are. That is not a cozy, individualistic slogan. It is a demand to create values rather than inherit them. But creating values requires a community because we are social animals. Solitude without reflection becomes delusion. Plato's cave suggests that when we turn from the shadows alone, the light is blinding. Existential courage asks for translation. When you see the sun, can you teach others to see it in a way that doesn't terrify them? An unsettling twist: sometimes your true self is monstrous by the values you were raised under. Not monstrous in the sense of evil, but in the sense of being radically different. Maybe your honest grains are loud and messy. A family that prizes quiet order will call you chaotic, a culture that values work over play will call you lazy. To become who you are sometimes invites moral friction. You can be humane and still wrong. You can be brutally honest and yet cruel. You are not freed by authenticity to abandon ethics. The paradox of our condition is that honesty must be coupled with responsibility, freedom must be practiced in virtue. So let me give you a different kind of map. Your life is a dialectic between eros and logos, desire and reason. Too much logic, and you quell the music of your life. Too much desire, and you ravage yourself and others. Your task, the one no one promised you help for, is to choreograph them. This is what wise persons across traditions taught: the art of living is the art of harmonizing within. Stoic, Christian, Dionysian, they all converge on the fact that the self can be disciplined without being murdered. We live in an economy of attention. Platforms monetize your compromise by rewarding predictable performance. Algorithms prefer sameness because sameness keeps you on the platform. The machine does not intend your destruction, it intends your attention. But in giving it your attention, you trade away time that could be used to practice the small difficulties that make you coherent. You are not merely failing yourself when you scroll, you are investing in a counterfeit that pays immediate dividends and long-term impoverishment. This is not a moral scold. It is a financial accounting of human life. Ask yourself, am I accruing toward a project of worth? Or am I collecting validations? Let's take a second story to illustrate a different uncomfortable truth. There was a philosopher, not famous, who taught in a declining university department. He began to post short essays online in mornings before class. His pieces were not tidy, they were ragged with questions. Slowly, people began to write to him about how the essays changed how they loved, how they left abusive partners, how they chose careers. He never monetized them. He went on living modestly. A woman who had been his student later said to him, "You changed the temperature of the room." He had not intended to be a hero. He had intended to practice the habit of writing honestly. The twist: the world he moved was not the high-power sphere, it was the subtle, distributed sphere of people who needed a vocabulary to leave their cages. The philosopher's small acts, repeated, rewired the room. The moral here: impact is not only created by dramatic gestures. It is also created by repeated, honest, modest acts. You don't have to burn your life down to create meaning. Often, patience is courage disguised. Still, for some of you, small acts are insufficient. You have a slow-burning injustice inside you that requires a larger rupture. Perhaps it is leaving a career that deploys harm, founding an organization, or exposing a truth that will cost you dearly. In those moments you must decide under a different ethic. Do you have support? Can you prepare your flank? Courage without prudence may be spectacle and not freedom. Prudence without courage may be cowardice and not preservation. Between them lies strategy, the kind Machiavelli taught, but reinterpreted, not as cynical manipulation, but as an understanding of how power circulates. If you want to change the world, you must know which doors open and which ones slam. That knowledge is not moral impurity, it is a map for your risk. Now an uncomfortable truth you probably don't want to hear: sometimes you prefer your compromises. Sometimes the cost of not compromising is a life where there is less comfort, fewer friends, more exile. The mind will rationalize staying small because it is attached to certain pleasures, approval, predictability, the illusion that your life is safe. There is nothing to do then but to face the price. You must enumerate the opposite of the life you live and ask if you are willing to pay for it. It may be that you aren't. That too is a legitimate choice. I refuse to moralize that choice into shame. But I will not let you sleep in the illusion that you are brave because you have chosen safety and called it wisdom. Courage is visible, measurable, it asks you to pay. So how do you pay for the life you want? Practically, pick 3 things you will defend over the next year. They should be small enough to be realistic and large enough to matter. Make social arrangements. Who will keep you accountable? Find a small community that reflects the values you intend to embody, not because they give you easy praise, but because they tell you the truth. Cultivate a craft that allows you to feel the muscle of doing difficult things. And let your imagination be a rehearsal hall. In small acts, you practice being larger. Let me end with a thought that combines Bonhoeffer's responsibility and Nietzsche's creative will. Imagine you are at a funeral. Not of a person, but of all the lives you might have lived but didn't. Imagine lining up the possible selves you abandoned because they were inconvenient or dangerous. Walk their faces. Each one will whisper to you the chance you refused. Now imagine at the same funeral there is a small, stubborn child who insists on naming the coffins aloud and refusing to leave. This child is your inner refusal, the part that will not be quieted by sensible arguments about risk and comfort. That child is messy and loud and not very polite. But that child is the seed of your courage. You may not be able to resurrect every abandoned life. You cannot live all possible selves at once. But you can witness them, mourn them, and select one life to honor. Choose with tenderness. Choose with ruthless honesty. Choose as if someone you love depended on it, because someone does, yourself. Before you switch this off, do this: turn the lights down, breathe slowly, and for 5 minutes imagine telling the truth you have been postponing. Not the flared, damaging truth, but the one that will make a small arrangement in your life. It could be a sentence: I am not happy doing X. Or, I want to try Y. Or, I forgive myself for not being perfect. Say the sentence in your mind. Notice how your stomach tightens. Let it. This is the body waking up. Live as if you are answerable. Live as if the small things matter. The philosopher Hannah Arendt once said that the most radical act is to bear witness. Bonhoeffer would say the most radical act is to take responsibility. Nietzsche would remind you to sculpt yourself. Do all 3. Be faithful, be fierce, be honest. If nothing else, leave with this image: the life you are now is a map full of lines you can redraw. Some lines you will strengthen, some you will erase, some you will color in wildly and let others criticize. There is a gentle violence to remapping. It is the slow process of becoming. If you choose nothing, you will have the illusion of safety and the reality of erosion. If you choose something, even a small, stubborn something, you will be living the essential human experiment, to turn toward the light and teach others, by your existence, to do the same. Tonight, before you sleep, step into one small dark room in your house and open it. Take one object out. Hold it. Ask, what story does this belong to? Do I want to keep this story? If yes, arrange it. If no, burn it in the clean fire of decision. This is a tiny rebellion. It will not cure everything. But it will give you one more night of coherence. The world will try to make you a shadow or a mirror. You can refuse both. You can become a lantern. And one last thing, a dangerous and beautiful command, become the person who would have kept 10-year-old you from being afraid. That child deserved an ally. Be that ally now.